Hello, and welcome to a Skyrim thing. I said for years that I didn't like Skyrim, but that's not entirely true. It does, frankly, a lot of things worse than the games that preceded it, but it does some things better, and it's very much its own thing in comparison to, say, Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Fallout 4, Starfield. You get the picture. This may come as some surprise to those of you that have found your way to my channel previously. I understand my videos can come across as being overwhelmingly negative, but it's true. I like this game. I appreciate having Skyrim in my gaming library, and I don't see myself ever having it uninstalled for very long. Admittedly, it helps that it's only 15 gigs. I don't really have that much to gain by uninstalling it. Skyrim is its own thing in gaming, and it hits a very specific point of being mechanically kinda brain dead while still having a world that is able to surprise and intrigue and entertain. And I want to talk about something Skyrim does with its world that draws me back in every so often. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to my members, currently on screen. These fine folk go above and beyond to support the channel, and I am very grateful to them. Being a member is never required, but always appreciated. Thank you. Since it will inevitably come up in the comments, the mods that I'm using for this session are on screen, as well as linked in the description below. I won't waste time explaining each one, but they're all quality of life mods. There's nothing in this list that changes the available content or gameplay mechanics of the vanilla Skyrim experience. And as with all vanilla, or practically vanilla for all intents and purposes, playthroughs of Skyrim, we begin on a cart ride into Helgen. I've already spoken about this introduction at some length, so I'll leave that video to speak for itself, but I decided to start a comfort playthrough, and that means a stealth archer. Not a straight stealth archer though. I'm going to try weaving in some illusion and conjuration, and I plan to take a companion to act as a bit of a tank alongside my summons, so stealth will really only be my opener for a majority of encounters. Also, I'm an orc. Orcs get 0 skill bonuses to any of the skills I intend to rely on, but that quickly becomes irrelevant after all of, an hour of casual gameplay. No, I'm an orc for the Berserker Rage daily power. Deal twice as much damage while taking half damage for 60 seconds once per day. It's pretty good. I can either use it in a panic to turn the tide in my favor, or I can pop it preemptively before a stealth attack and do some pretty wild damage. It sounded fun to mess with in my head. Compare and contrast with the two races that I most often see getting the stealth archer treatment. Khajiit get Night Eye for 60 seconds, in a game where I often can't tell at a glance if it's night or just overcast. And Wood Elves get to command an animal for 60 seconds? What the? I could make a video just on the balance between the races, because they're a total mess. Subscribe for when that goes live. You know how this works. In any case, race selection doesn't end up mattering very much in this video, but I thought I'd share in case it inspired your next character. Once I finish shaping the optimal orc, they get some fun eye options by the way, I narrowly avoid getting my head cut off by those damned Imperials and escape Helgen. Yeah, I'm glossing over it that fast. Nothing happened during my unmodded Helgen sequence that you haven't already seen too many times on your own copy of the game. I bet several of you are already typing in the comments about Live Another Life or whatever other alternate start mod. I'm aware of them. They're cool. Not the point. Once out of the cave beneath Helgen, I headed off to Riverwood and did the usual. Stopped in at the Riverwood Trader, picked up the quest for the Golden Claw, and sold whatever I picked up from Helgen while it burned to the ground. You know, like the little bastard sneak thief I am. I briefly considered picking up Faendal for when I do go through Bleak Falls Barrow, but, why? It's the first dungeon in the game, there's no challenge, and as explored previously, they're both little smarmballs. From here, I usually go to Bleak Falls Barrow and get the clear out of the way, but I opted to instead head off to Whiterun right away. No real reason, I just did. Whiterun. Yeah, nothing too interesting here either. Basically just got the Dragonstone quest and turned around. Which brings us to Bleak Falls Barrow, the first test of my character. Sorta. It's still really low level, so almost nothing is online by this point. But I'm able to test my Berserker Rage on the boss, so that was neat. Still had to fall back to sword and board because I don't have a pack of tanky followers and summons yet, but it seemed to work well enough. After clearing the dungeon, I stopped into Riverwood, dropped off the claw, returned to Whiterun, watched some NPCs awkwardly mime being people, and we're off to kill our first dragon. The dragon fight ends up being pretty uneventful. You know, standard Skyrim stuff. Super quick aside, I'm still surprised there isn't more going on with the visual effects for Unrelenting Force, especially in the special edition sorta remaster. You know, stuff like dust getting kicked up, maybe some pebbles getting thrown around, ripples in water, shaking grass. Destiny does those last two with the Warlock melee, and it's really cool. After playing with Unrelenting Force for a bit, I made my way back to Whiterun to gloat about slaying a dragon, and, much more importantly, pick up Lydia.
Lead the way.
And then go back to the dragon because I forgot to loot it with all the excitement of getting my dragon shout. But once that's taken care of, and like most playthroughs that follow the main questline, this is really where our tale begins. Everything before this point is pretty linear. If you're following the main quest, there's just not that much that can happen on the handful of roads you've traveled so far. Maybe an unusual spawn of wolves, a group of revelers, or some guards escorting a noble. Nothing really noteworthy. This quest, though, is the first time that we're being sent a sizable distance away, and specifically outside of the relative safety of what I previously christened Beginner's Valley, or the wide-open expanse that is the eastern half of Whiterun Hold. There are certainly distractions aplenty to be found along the roads we've traveled thus far. Embershard Mine is a notable example on the way to Riverwood, but this is the first time one of those distractions is placed directly on the road, instead of a short distance away. I'm talking, of course, about the Valtheim Towers. The Valtheim Towers are not an especially interesting or complicated location, but they represent one of the things that Skyrim is very good at, giving the player the opportunity to make decisions in a freeform manner, without those decisions necessarily being constrained to happening within the confines of the dialogue system. You can walk up to the bandit at the door who will engage you in conversation and attempt to extort you for toll money. There's a whole dialogue tree with skill checks and whatnot, and it's very neat, but I ain't about that. I'm about casting Fury at this archer on the top of the first tower, killing this mud crab so Lydia stops losing her crap, sniping this bandit a couple times, moving in and realizing there were actually two bandits at this door that I took out, taking out the archer on the roof, taking out this archer from across the river, crossing the bridge and taking out this guy, and finally taking out the leader now that he has no support. That's what I'm about. Once the bandits are cleared out, I gather up the loot and continue on my way. A short ways down the road to Iverstead, I happen upon two people standing over a dead body on the road. Actually, there are 3 dead bodies, but I didn't realize that in time. Now, I've been around Skyrim for a hot minute, and I figure, oh, those are the Vigilants, aren't they? So I come out of the bush I was hiding in and start walking closer to get their accusatory proselytizing over with, and they attack me. Turns out, this was a pair of vampires that killed the Vigilants and is now wearing their robes as a disguise. I immediately contract sanguinary vampirus from their very first attack, which is the precursor disease to full-blown vampirism. Pretty bad luck, that. Contracting sanguinary vampirus is only a 10% chance from the vampiric drain attack, which is the attack they used, but, 10%. Like, come on, man. What is this, XCOM? I'm just trying to get to the Greybeards because of some Nord nonsense. I don't even...
Nord nonsense? Why, you puffed up ignorant.
In any event, I get the sickness, and I am not down with it. Okay, quick aside. Time for a tack tangent, if you will. If you've been around the channel for a minute, or just watched the opening of this video, you'll know that I am a Mora boomer. As such, I distinctly remember the downsides of vampirism in the pre-Skyrim games. In Morrowind, vampires can't pay bounties or serve jail time because guards always attack. They cannot regenerate health by sleeping. They take 5 damage per second while outside during the 14 daylight hours of the day. They cannot use any form of fast travel outside of the Propylon indexes because no fast travel service providers will speak to vampires. They cannot learn any spells because there are no vampire merchants that teach spells, and they cannot accept or complete most quests because, again, no one will speak to vampires. And yes, this does include the main quest. though also yes, the back path can still be completed, technically. In Oblivion, the ill effects of vampirism are significantly reduced, thanks in large part to being able to pass for a normal mortal. However, you are still susceptible to taking damage from the sun, unless you feed on a daily basis, which restricts your ability to fast travel or wait. Other than that, the only real downside is somehow getting uglier. I know it's hard to believe that's possible in Oblivion, but it's true. In Skyrim, the downsides of being a vampire are further reduced, because God forbid the player ever be subjected to any amount of friction during gameplay. The only negatives to being a vampire in Skyrim are a growing weakness to fire magic, which is kinda situational if it matters or not, and is nerfed by 50% with Dawnguard installed, and weakness to sunlight, which is another scaling effect that decreases your maximum health, magicka, and stamina by up to 60 points, and prevents passive regeneration while outside during the day. Which, I mean, it's not insignificant, but it's also a far cry from actively taking damage in the sun like vampires used to. The bonuses granted by vampirism in Skyrim are actually pretty attractive for a stealth character like I'm playing in this playthrough, though the downsides are a bit too much for me at my current level. Losing about half of my magicka during the daytime hours as an early game illusion conjuration build isn't gonna go well for me. Perhaps down the line I'll willingly accept the gift, but the downsides are too much for my character's current level. Since I don't want to become a vampire at the moment, I need to get that problem sorted. I know that in this pre-vampirism state of Sanguinaire Vampirus, the disease can still be cured with any cure disease effect, though without looking it up, I don't know how long I have before it progresses to full-blown vampirism. This is one of incredibly few systems in Skyrim where time is actually of the essence. Curing my pending vampirism is my new top priority. Summons of the Greybeards be damned. The delay is 3 days, by the way, I looked it up after. I find it's more fun for some things to remain a mystery during gameplay. I first check what potions I have on hand. I knew I hadn't bought any, but they occasionally come up in loot. Okay. I do not have cure disease. Alright. I then waffle about for a bit, deciding what town to go to. I'm closest to Ivarstead, but it's a very minor settlement and definitely doesn't have an alchemist. It's not an option. I could continue on to Riften, but it's not really any closer than my other two options. I could turn around and head back to Whiterun, or I could go north to Windhelm. Alright, so I gotta get into town. Otherwise I'm gonna have to make it into Riften. Do I just turn around? I'm kind of feeling like I need to turn around. Or Windhelm. I think Windhelm is actually closer. Let's do that. We're right at the intersection. Windhelm it is. I should probably note that I'm mostly not using fast travel in this playthrough, as it trivializes this exact kind of interaction with the game. Obviously, I should just fast travel to Whiterun. Duh. It would take like less than a minute to just fast travel back, pick up the potion, and be back to where I was. It's time efficient, but it's also significantly less mechanically interesting to be able to just skip around past anything that could happen on the road. Remember, I'm in this situation in the first place because I'm not fast traveling. And sure, I can't fast travel to Ivarstead at this point in the game because I haven't been there yet. My point still stands that if I was able to fast travel there, and did, I wouldn't be having this scenario play out. So I decide to head north to Windhelm. It's a pretty uneventful trip. I don't have the time to be dawdling around doing dungeons on the side of the road after all. I enter Windhelm, head into the market district, and find the alchemist. Real short tangent, but Windhelm is an incredibly weird city. I know Bethesda always struggles to make their cities believable, but something about the tight quarters and high walls of Windhelm really drive home just how small it is. In any case, I head into the alchemist's shop, and while I'm picking up the cure disease potion that I so desperately need, he shoves another tincture into my hands and tells me to fulfill his lifelong quest to retrieve the white phial. I mean, dude seems like kind of a total jerk, but he did save my life, so I figure I might as well repay the favor. Besides, it's only a short trip down the road to the dungeon he wants me to go to. And this is the quiet genius of Skyrim, emergent narrative. Emergent narrative is when the player's personal journey through a game is made of little mechanical interactions between the game's various systems. I got a disease and it needed to be cured, which sent me off on an adventure, and, though I ended my retelling of events before this, I ended up finding other things to do after I gave the white phial to the alchemist. Things that weren't the main quest. This expresses itself in smaller ways as well. The player might come upon a forsworn camp and engage without realizing that they're horribly underleveled for the fight they've gotten themselves into. Maybe you end up getting a kill or two and some sweet new gear out of it, but it put a serious dent in your stock of arrows and about half of your health potions before you were able to get out. So now you're down a bunch of resources and you still need to complete the dungeon that your actual quest sent you to. Or maybe you start a fight that you can't win, so you manage to escape by climbing over a mountain that the AI can't get around, and you find a friendly NPC that asks you for your help. And if you help them, you end up with a follower. Skyrim is full of these little narratives that aren't written, they just happen because the systems are there and you stumble into them, building your own personal emergent narrative as you go. Emergent narrative isn't unique to Skyrim, to be clear. It's something that exists in every other Bethesda RPG, as well as a huge number of other games. Minecraft and survival games as a whole are especially prone to supporting emergent narratives because of how systems-driven they are. Caves of Qud, or however you pronounce it, is another shining example. But Skyrim does it better than many other games, and better than many of its contemporaries and even games that are many years newer and more technically capable. I still don't like Skyrim in a lot of ways, but the things it does well, it does really well. And sometimes I'm not looking for mechanical depth in my game, and I just want to play something where I have to consider a longer stretch of time than just the next 30 seconds of fun. And that's where Skyrim slots in for me. It's simple, but sometimes my hubris comes back to bite me anyway. And if you're still listening to me yammer, thank you very much. If you liked the video, I'd appreciate you dropping a like or maybe a comment if you've got something to add. My comment section tends to be surprisingly civil and there's usually a couple good threads of discussion. If you really feel like getting into the weeds, there's also a link to my Discord in the description, right next to a link to my Blue Sky. But at the end of the day, thank you very much for merely stopping by and lending me your ear. And, as always, have a good one.